Okay, should we just introduce ourselves? So I'm James Bevan, I'm a clinical psychologist at the Darwin Centre, which is an adolescent inpatient unit in Cambridge. You guys want to...
I'm Philippa, I'm the systemic psychotherapist on the unit.
I'm Jan, I'm the nurse assistant on the unit. I'm Saoirse and I'm the clinical nurse specialist on the unit.
Okay, so we wanted to begin just by marking the task, and we wondered if you could help us think about how we promote mentalising in the context that we're going to talk to you about. So it's a context where there's very powerful feelings, anxiety is very contagious and moves very, very fast. So we wanted you just to help us think, perhaps some practical strategies, but perhaps not, perhaps something around just how do we help promote mentalising in this context, and helping us think about that would be really useful. So to set the context, we wanted just to play you a couple of clips. One is from YouTube. It's not always like this on the unit, sometimes it's like this. It conveys something of the feeling that can be around when there's a crisis or when there's an incident at the Darwin Centre. The images don't fit as well, they're from an adult psychiatric unit somewhere else, but we just felt it connected with the feeling. And we also have recorded the sound of our alarms as well, which we're going to play at the beginning. So we just wanted you to kind of, without overwhelming your mentalising capacities and to help kind of mentalise us, to just imagine yourself kind of in this context and just think about how it feels. That's okay.
Where did you get to?
I'm a Korean War veteran! Tornado! I told you that! Stay! Oh, get out of there! I want to get out of there! I want to get out of there! I want people who suffer mental illness are suffering from pain. And it's nothing to laugh at. And it's not funny.
Okay, so as I said, not always like that. It doesn't always feel like that. There's something about how things can feel very, very chaotic and very intense at times on the unit. So I'm going to hand over to Philippa in a sec, who's just going to talk a little bit about why we decided to have AMBIT on the Darwin Centre, because as Dickon said, it's not as usual, is it? It's a bit different. So Philippa's going to say a bit first. We're going to concentrate a bit more on some of the challenges of implementing the AMBIT model in this context, and then we're going to hear from Jan and Saoirse as well.
Okay, so a bit about why we chose AMBIT. What that clip shows really clearly, I think, which is always to the fore for us as a team, is that the staff are often are just as anxious and just as unable to mentalise as the young people, because you're dealing with, and Jan in particular is going to talk a bit more about this, but you're dealing with situations which happen so quickly and which are so distressing that before you know where you are, the entire team, the anxiety is up here and there's panic, and your ability to think and to mentalise is just gone. It's just gone before you've even made that first intervention as to how you're going to manage a situation. Other reasons we chose AMBIT, the young people we have on the unit, we have 14, up to 14, they're almost without exception very, very complex. They don't fit a single diagnosis, they don't fit any clinical pathway, there's no obvious kind of intervention or series of interventions, and we really like the way that this model, it gives us permission to do that and to be really flexible and to cherry pick and to... We're very lucky, we can offer quite a wide range of interventions and therapies, but this doesn't tell us that we have to offer CBT or we can do a really bespoke package for young people. what we try and do with young people at the Darwin, we have two tasks really. Most people have an assessment, so most people come in for an assessment, and I think you might get a different answer to this depending on who you spoke to, but James and I and Paul, our consultant who's not here, I think would certainly say that the main thing that we're trying to do is give the young person a really rich story and understanding of how they've got to where they are, and some ideas, some really kind of well thought through ideas about where to go from here, because we don't get to cure young people. Our goal, we have a very explicit goal, which is we get them well enough to be discharged. Okay. On that note, another reason why we use AMBIT is because we see that young people come into the Darwin because the scaffolding networks around them can't manage anymore. Those relationships have broken down. That's why they're with us. It's not necessarily about how ill they are. It's about the level of risk and anxiety, and they're not manageable in the community. If Paul were here, he would probably say the other reason he likes AMBIT is that it gives us a badge. Okay, it gives us a model. It gives us, we have nurses, HCAs, psychotherapists, psychologists, occupational therapists, social workers, admin staff, domestics, housekeepers. We have such a wide range of staff in our team. It gives us a starting point. We say we do AMBIT. We're an AMBIT-based team. That's how we work. So I would say that we use it as much for us as a team as we do as a way of working with young people. Okay.
So I was just going to say a little bit about how we have actually used AMBIT on the ward so far, kind of practically. And then I think talk a bit more about some of the challenges, because that might be more useful in terms of thinking about how we take things forward. We definitely give a big nod to the idea about things being AMBIT and not very AMBIT, and we notice that, we talk about that. So it's really helpful in us stopping and thinking. So when we do get into these kind of conversations about, why isn't that social worker, doing more, or get into storytelling, it's really useful just to be able to stop and say, hold on a minute, that's not AMBIT. And on the flip side as well, talking and noticing the things that are AMBIT is really, really useful. In terms of more explicit things, there's been much more of a focus on holding a mentalising stance. And we do that in lots of different forums and in different ways. So one way is in our multidisciplinary team meeting each week. We ask young people to come in, and we try really hard to contextualise behaviours, situations, incidents in terms of mental states. And as you can imagine, most young people who come into the meeting don't want to say much in that kind of forum. But we do lots of talking with each other and hypothesising and thinking and guessing around what might be going on for the young person. And I think the experience of having a kind of team do that around you is quite powerful. And you often know when something's not helping a young person, because they'll get up and walk out, or they'll just they'll swear at you, or something will happen. But it doesn't when we do this, and there's something I think quite containing and useful about it. So we're doing much more of that. Many more kind of informal conversations like that as well. So kind of handing over between staff. So if I went to do a psychology session with a young person, I might talk to, for example, Jan, who'd been on their observations about how they've been getting on that morning. We'd have a similar kind of conversation, thinking and guessing and trying to make sense of feelings. So those are two explicit things. Other things we've done, as Philippa mentioned, so focusing a lot on relationships. And when a young person comes into the unit, there's a vast array of people, and how do you make a relationship? And we do have this idea of a care team. But since doing the training, I think we're much more flexible about thinking, okay, well, who have you made a relationship with? Who does fit? And then really trying to support that, and whether that person needs extra supervision, or finding ways to make that relationship work and make it useful is a big thing. We talk explicitly about mentalising in our case discussion, so we have a formulation meeting every week, and we ask the team to stop and to imagine how it feels to be the young person at the moment, and for them then to talk about how they feel with the young person, so counter-reference stuff, and then we think about how can we use that. How is that useful for us as a team? What are the traps that we might fall into, kind of knowing this and having this sense of the young person? What else do? We do training, we manualise. So we've done an induction. That's been a challenge. I think someone else might mention that, but very difficult to free people up and do training. But we have managed to have a kind of 3-hour session with new people starting on the ward, and use the Wiki manual, which has been really helpful. and manualising some of the key kind of issues that we have. So people running away, drugs on the unit, self-harm, ligatures. So putting that into kind of mental state terms for the staff, having some guidelines that are in the manual, and just kind of going back and keeping on giving them out again and again, because we find that things kind of slip and you forget and you get into a crisis and you can't think. So it's just a really good way of being able to go back and say, okay, here's what we talked about. Let's just go back and kind of redistribute these guidelines. So that's another big. I think those are kind of the main bits we've been doing. And of course, the kind of direct therapeutic work, so really influential in terms of the individual therapy work that we might do in the family therapy work as well. So we hold this stance a lot. We think about this kind of stance often. Okay.
We did an art project with our young people, and it's an AMBIT wall. It's up on one of the walls in our ward, and this is just a film that we made about the making of the AMBIT wall, just to finish on sometimes it can be quite nice at the Darwin.
Nice, lots of the time.
So the soundtrack is taken from the music therapy group, and in the art therapy and mentalization group, which I didn't mention actually, we asked young people to try and kind of capture what sense they made of this word mentalization from the conversations they'd had, and then we tried to put that into a visual image and filmed it.
3, 4.